Welcome in, everyone. I hope you're having a nice evening so far. This is Brandy Deason with Air Alliance Houston, and we are going to be talking about Houston Refining LP or LyondellBasell in the Pasadena area and the upcoming permit hearing going on. All right, so for our agenda this evening, we'll have an overview of what's going on. We'll talk about something called chemical or advanced recycling of plastics, the pollutants and health impacts from that. We'll discuss what's going on in the community around the facility as far as who lives there. And Amy Din from Lonestar Legal Aid, apologies for the little mistake, loan at Star Legal Aid. We'll be talking about the permit legal requirements. And our team member Reem will finish us out by discussing TCEQ's public meeting process and testimony. And then we will take questions. So at Air Alliance Houston, we believe everyone deserves to breathe clean air, and we support communities as they advocate for clean air and for their health. So with the Lyondell facility, Houston Refining LP, there have been some mixed messages as of late. The Houston Refining LP is actually shut down, and they may be investing, it's LyondellBasell's facility, they may be investing in chemical recycling. They won't be making that decision until 2026, but they want to renew their Title V permit now. And the emissions from a chemical or advanced recycling facility are different than emissions from a refinery in some ways. So common pollutants that did come from Houston refining would be your volatile organic compounds and hazardous air pollutants listed here, and some greenhouse gases. Well, chemical recycling is a new process for them that they want to start at this facility. And this is a suite of processes that heats or chemically treats plastic to break it down into its raw components to be used to make other plastics or fuel. It's essentially burning the plastic. These processes have not been shown to reduce single-use plastics, but it's being widely promoted as a solution to plastic waste. We have concerns about this because these processes require large amounts of energy that contribute to climate change. The mixed plastics are dirty and they contain toxins. And these processes encourage a continued increase in plastic production. Processing plastic in this way would require about 10,000 plants at their capacity now to take on all the plastic waste that we have out there. An untold amount of it is turned into diesel fuel and what they call sustainable aviation fuel, and then that is burned. And the process also creates hazardous waste, greenhouse gases, and air pollution. So some of the concerns around chemical or advanced recycling facilities have to do with their difference of pollutants. You'll see here carbon monoxide is a common one. You've got polyaromatic hydrocarbons, which are just they're carcinogens and they're irritants. You've got dioxins, which is a little bit different, and you can get some heavy metals and arsenic. You also get a large increase of carbon dioxide. So, and the health effects from exposure are very similar, very similar. So some other concerns around facilities like these are your noise pollution, odors, and even light pollution. Within 2 miles of the Houston refining location, there's over 9,500 houses, 3 schools, 2 child care centers, 2 places of worship, and 2 parks. And this is just a map of the area showing some of those things. And as far as the languages spoken in the area, it's about 70% Spanish and 30% English. So let's talk about the permit a little bit. First, we'll talk about the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. They are the people responsible for making sure that we do the planning, permitting, and monitoring of environmental projects for the state of Texas. Some of the things they work on for air, they monitor air quality, air emissions, and they monitor operations around oil and gas. For land, they do waste management, remediations, agriculture, oil and gas. And for water, they work with the drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, wells, and rivers. So a Title V permit, which is the permit that we'll be talking about for this meeting, it would allow 5 more years of operations if approved. They can approve it, they can amend the permit, or they can reject it. And just looking at the past history of uh, Lyondell running this facility, they've been in trouble for some violations in the past, so they've not always been a good neighbor. And so I would like to introduce Amy Din from Lonestar Legal Aid. So Amy, go ahead and take it away. Thank you so much.
Brandy, yeah, so I'm an attorney at Lone Star Legal Aid. I head up our environmental justice group, and so we're working with Caring for Pasadena communities to put together some comments on this particular permit. And I wanted to share with you kind of some information about federal operating permits as well as what are we permitting? What is the plan for this particular facility? So our Title V permit is a federal operating permit. So although we are submitting comments to TCEQ, this is actually a federal permit. It's part of Title V under the Clean Air Act. And a Title V permit is basically required by the Clean Air Act for any major sources. So that's any facility that's going to put out more air pollution or some of the most air pollution that we have in the airshed. So you go to the next slide. And particularly, we call these major sources. So they basically any emissions that are over a threshold that's set for each of the air pollutants that EPA monitors, which I have a list of them here: carbon monoxide, ozone, lead, nitrogen oxides, particulate matter, sulfur dioxides, volatile organic compounds. Each of these has a threshold, and if the facility is over that amount, then they are a major source of that type of emission or pollutant, and that's why they require this special operating permit. So not every facility has a Title V permit, but because this particular facility used to be a refinery, now, as we mentioned, it's been shut down, it has had traditionally this Title V permit. So we're kind of in a weird status with this particular facility because we're not quite sure exactly what the new emissions would be. Historically, they have been a major source and required a Title V permit. So we go next. Slide. Okay, great. So who regulates those Title V permits? So both the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, which Brandy already talked about, as well as the EPA have jurisdiction over these Title V permits. Basically, the TCEQ drafts or prepares this draft operating permit, and then it is reviewed by EPA. So there's so many Title V permits in Texas that the TCEQ helps the EPA by putting together this first draft, and then the EPA is able to review it and determine whether it's complete or not. But ultimately, it is a federal operating permit just administered by TCEQ. Thank you. All right, so what's the status? Where are we in this process, right? Because I think you might have heard earlier in the presentation, it's kind of on a 5-year cycle, right? They've had this permit for a very long time and they've renewed it every 5 years. And so this application actually went in for this renewal back in July of 2022, right? So as I said, they applied to renew the permit, and then TCEQ put together this draft permit that then they put out for public comment. So that proposed permit came out in the fall, and luckily there has been a public hearing noticed on this particular permit because a lot of people may have been interested in this particular permit given this this transition that the facility is going under. So that comment period actually gets extended to the time that the public hearing ends. So our public comment period is going to end on May 6th at the end of the public hearing. And so you have time to submit comments on this particular facility either at the hearing, which we're going to talk about next, at how that's going to go, but also you can submit comments in writing up until the conclusion of that. So after that, TCEQ will publish what they call a notice of final action, which is what they're planning to do on the permit. So if we go to next slide, once that notice of final action is put out there, and TCEQ also responds to the comments that it receives through this comment process, either at the hearing or in written submission, the EPA has 45 days to review what the TCEQ is going to do. So it reviews the response to comments that it generates. It can review all the comments received and determine whether TCEQ's response is sufficient and the current permit as proposed is sufficient. EPA then makes a decision on what they want to do with the permit at that time. If EPA says it's fine, there's still a public petition period that goes 60 days from the end of EPA's review period, and that gives the public another chance to comment on deficiencies in this process. But we this time go to EPA and explain to EPA why additional changes might be needed to the permit. Those changes have to be raised during this comment period. So it kind of is a process that builds on itself. It's kind of, we raise the concern to TCEQ. If TCEQ doesn't listen to us, we have tried to appeal to EPA. Does that make sense? And then EPA will review it and determine what to do with the petition. If EPA doesn't object to the permit after the petition, TCEQ can go ahead and move forward with the federal operating permit. EPA can also suggest to TCEQ that it make changes to the permit. So there's still a long way to go in this process, even though the application was filed back in 2022. All right, I'll go forward. All right. So what are we looking at? What's important when we look at these Title V permits? Well, if we think about the Title V permit and its whole purpose, it's basically to take all the Clean Air Act requirements applicable to this particular facility and put it in one permit. So this facility has been operating for a while, but it may have a permit to do this, and it may have a separate permit to put out additional pollution here, and a separate permit related to another unit that puts out this amount of pollution. The idea is that this federal operating permit is kind of like the umbrella permit, the global permit that that lists out every permit, every emission level that this facility is subject to, so it's all in one place. And so if you want to know exactly how much emissions this facility is putting out, the idea is that the public can pull this permit and see that, right? So we aren't doing it all piecemeal. We have one place where we can review the total emission profile for this facility. Now, each of that permit has to include all the applicable requirements for the sources of emission at that facility, and it's got to include all the permit terms necessary to assure compliance. So if this particular permit that was issued by TCEQ says they have to do X, Y, and Z, those requirements should also be mirrored in the Title V permit across all the different permits they have with TCEQ. So one way they kind of, I don't want to say cheat, but one way that they accomplish all of those things, because these permits are all very long and technical, they can incorporate by reference, right? So they can say, oh, we are referencing something that's in this permit, and we're going to incorporate that into the Title V permit. However, those references under the review that's been developed by EPA have to be really specific. And so this is where we can kind of catch them in making mistakes and putting together the permit, is that when they incorporate by reference, we have to have specific things that they're actually referencing from the other permits. And if it's non-specific, we can call that out and say it needs to be more specific so that the public understands, right, what these requirements are being incorporated into this global permit. All right, next. Thank you. All right. So the other part of a Title V permit, really key, is monitoring, right? So we want everything to be in one place so we can make sure it's in compliance with the Clean Air Act. But that permit also has to show how we are going to make sure we're complying, right? So part of that is periodic testing or monitoring or keeping records or reporting out sufficient to ensure that there's compliance with all of those requirements and permit terms. So we make this global permit, but then that incorporates all the different permit terms, but then we also have to show that they're meeting those terms, right? And so that's the part of monitoring and record keeping and compliance that is also very key to the Title V permit. So sometimes things that get permitted by the state don't always have all of those monitoring requirements in there. This is where we can pull them in and demand monitoring be done because of the level of emissions that they may be putting out at the facility. So just for example, if a facility is putting out a lot of VOCs, we might want to have regular monitoring around those VOCs at the facility to make sure that it is not polluting the local community, right? That based on the level of VOC emissions. All right, then we'll go next slide. All right, and so we have an opportunity here, right? One of the things that we can comment on is we want to add additional monitoring requirements to this federal operating permit. And where we don't have existing monitoring requirements in the permit, or they're not sufficient on a periodic basis to determine whether that facility is maintaining compliance with its permit, you can try to add additional monitoring terms. And this is always a good opportunity to look at the facility as a whole and determine whether you need to increase monitoring to ensure compliance. And that could be reporting or monitoring or some kind of check on that the system is doing how it is operating how it should. Right, next. All right, and so air monitoring concerns. What are we concerned about here with this particular permit? I think you heard something about the facility's closed down, but it's changing to an advanced recycling facility. What does this mean? The backstory for this particular facility over in Pasadena is that the facility was having a whole bunch of problems. Basically, it's an old facility. I think it was early 1900s that the thing went into early operation. And it costs money to continue to upgrade that facility to keep it within the right amount of controls and stuff. The older facilities are much dirtier than the newer facilities. And they were having a lot of violations at the facility. They did not want to spend the capital to improve the facility. And so they tried to sell it, right? They tried to sell it to somebody else to see if they could just pass this old aging facility off to someone else to operate because they were having too much trouble maintaining it. It was getting too expensive. They couldn't sell it. They tried for like years. It was in the news. Couldn't sell it. So they made the plan, we're going to shut down the refinery as it's been operating as a refinery. And we're going to try to come up with a new business model for the site since we can't sell it. And that's how they've come up with the proposed plan to have an advanced recycling plan here. So they're going to take some components from the old refinery and try to reuse them or repurpose them into doing advanced recycling at the same site, right? But the problem is advanced recycling isn't the same as refining, right? Two different things. And we're concerned that we use a global permit that was designed to reflect the permitting that was at a facility that was a refinery. And now we're going to switch and do something completely different here, which is advanced recycling. And we need to make sure that the permit matches the operations, right? Because the emissions profile of both of those operations could be very different, right? The pollutants that we are looking at for advanced recycling may or may not be exactly the same as what they would be putting out at a refinery. And that's the refining that needs to be done around this permit as this transition is going to take place. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're very concerned about at this facility and what the community should be concerned about too, right? Because we don't know exactly what to expect. All right, I think I've got maybe one or two more slides. All right, so if you want to get more information on the permit, I think airmail is a great thing. They've already provided some of that underlying documentation. You can also find it on the TCEQ's website. So I just always let you know that that's a resource that they have some records online that you can pull up. And that's just basically how to find the application. If you're going to put in some monitoring comments, please remember to state a frequency, right? So continuous monitoring, weekly monitoring, monthly monitoring, quarterly monitoring, annual monitoring. These are terms that we can use to explain how regularly we want that monitoring to occur. And then we want it to be specific, the comments that you generate to be specific. Are there particular pollutants that you're concerned about with the advanced recycling process? And then remember how we talked about the incorporation by reference? Have they specifically incorporated something with a citation, right? They have referred back to that earlier permit that they're incorporating by reference, and that has to be done specifically. So those are kind of just some tips as you put together your comments. And then I'm going to turn it over to the next presenter to hopefully bring it home on what we're going to do at the hearing next Tuesday. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. This is my first time going through this process completely, and I just learned a lot from you. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. And so, without further ado, I'm going to introduce my esteemed colleague, Reem, to discuss, whoop, there it goes, what to expect at the TCEQ public meeting. Take it away, Reem.
Thanks, Brandy. Hello, everyone. My name is Reem Tariq. I am with Air Alliance Houston, and I'm excited to walk you through what to expect at the TCEQ public meeting and how to effectively participate. These meetings are an important opportunity for communities to weigh in on permits and could affect local air quality and public health. Next slide, please. So TCEQ public meetings typically last anywhere between 2 to 3 hours. So expect that. And they start 15 minutes prior to the official meeting time with the registration period. So at this point, this is where you can sign up to speak if you'd like. You could submit a comment. You could request interpretation devices if you need one of those. You could also sign up to the TCEQ's mailing list if you wanted to do that. The first 30 minutes of the meeting is not recorded. This is essentially your chance to speak with the TCEQ staff or the applicant. Ask your questions directly. It's basically a two-way conversation. You can ask them questions and they will respond to you. The second portion of the meeting is the more formal portion, which happens after, and that is recorded. During this time, those who signed up to submit a comment will be called one by one and will be given 5 minutes to speak. After the meeting, TCEQ will email responses to all formal comments that were received. All right, next slide. Now, here are some images that are up on the screen of some previous public meetings that we have attended, just to give you an idea of what to expect visually. It's going to look like a typical meeting. You'll see chairs lined up, and you're welcome to sit wherever you find it comfortable. Next slide. When it comes to submitting a comment, please note that you cannot submit an anonymous comment. and a person's immigration status has no impact on their right to comment. With regards to submitting a comment, we've got a couple of tips for you. Start with a simple intro. Start with your name, how close you live to the facility, then clearly state your opposition. For example, something like, I'm writing to express my opposition to TCEQ granting this new permit, or something along those lines. Also, regarding sharing your testimony, if you can, share a personal story, things that you might have observed, what has really impacted your health. That can help make your comment more impactful and more personable. In addition to that, you can also add suggestions for TCEQ. The TCEQ should require all polluting entities to use clear and enforceable language in their monitoring standards. Next slide. We want everyone to feel safe and supported in this meeting, so please note that you're not required to show your ID or share any personal information that you would not want to share. Just as a tip, we recommend using a buddy system. If you are not feeling safe, come with a friend or a neighbor. You may notice security on site, but that's pretty standard protocol, and it's not really related to any specific administration. And there's no need to worry because Air Alliance Houston staff will be there to help you submit your comments if you need support. If you prefer to submit your comments online, we can help you do that as well. Slide. Just as a reminder, this meeting is about Houston Refining LP permit, also known as LyondellBasell. The public meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, May 6th at 7 p.m. at San Jacinto College Central Campus in Pasadena in the Slocum Auditorium. The address is listed here on the slide. Could you back up, please? You can also submit your comment online using the QR code that you see up on the screen, or the permit number that is listed here, which is 1372. Be sure to submit your comment by May 6th. Next slide. In addition to commenting on permits, you can also report environmental concerns directly to TCEQ. The Houston Regional Office phone number is listed here up on the screen. You can also use the QR codes that are on the screen to file a complaint either in English or Spanish. Next slide. I know Amy briefly touched on this, but I'll talk a little bit more about Airmail. Airmail is our public notification tool. It scans new TCEQ air permit applications and allows us to mail nearby residents about them. You can find this tool on Air Alliance Houston's website under Community Updates. And just note that no registration is needed to receive these notices. Next slide. We encourage you to stay engaged. There are a variety of ways to stay engaged with Air Alliance Houston. You could sign up for our newsletter. You could follow us on social media at Air Alliance HOU and invite others to do the same. If you do have any questions, you're welcome to contact me or my colleague Brandy. Our emails are listed up here on the screen, and I'll also drop them in the chat. Just as a final thought, everyone has a right to breathe clean air, and your voice truly matters in this process. So thank you so much. I hope you submit a comment. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Brandy. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Reem. Great presentation. Much more comfortable with the process now, which is great. And I'm going to open up the floor for questions now. I've dropped my email in the chat there.
Hi, this is Patricia Gonzalez with Caring for Pasadena Communities. Do y'all have any substance as far as paperwork that where they have not complied with the Title V?
We could produce that for you.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah, and let me just yeah, we can do that, right? We can just pull them from the TCEQ and print them out. And yeah, I can pull up those violations. So I could send out if you are comfortable sending me an email, That way, just so I know how to respond back to you, I can get you that information for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Anyone else? Right. Well, I'm going to stop share so I can see your beautiful faces again. There we are. Okay. Well, if there are no further questions, I'm going to let you all get back to your evening, and we really hope to see you there on May the 6th. Have a wonderful evening, and thanks again for coming. Bye, everybody.